Hey guys, John here, and this is my quick review for the new Transformers 3, Transformers Dark of the Moon. Now, let me mention right up front, as many of you probably know this, I am the world's largest Transformers fanboy. When the first Transformers was announced, it was one of the very first topics I ever did on my podcast, and for 3 years, I talked about everything Transformers until the movie finally opened, and I loved it. I loved the first Transformers movie. Second Transformers came out. It was a big pile of garbage. They did everything wrong with that, and I was thoroughly disappointed and hated it. But in the last year or so, I've been talking online about how I still have faith in this franchise, and I still stand behind Michael Bay that he's the guy to direct this sort of film. He just made some fundamental mistakes with the second one that I think could be corrected. And one of the other things that gave me a lot of hope in this film was that Michael Bay, especially in the last few months, has been very forthright and open and honest, taking responsibility for the fact that number 2 was not as good as it should have been. And let's face it, it was terrible. And Michael Bay himself has come out and said, hey, that's on me. I made these mistakes. I recognize where we dropped the ball with Transformers 2, and Transformers 3 is going to be awesome. And that gave me a lot of hope and a lot of trust, and I was really, really impressed seeing him say something like that. Now, let me first start with the really good things about Transformers 3, okay? Transformers 3 is visually unbelievable. Now, all the Transformers movies under ILM have been just remarkable to visually look at. The design of the characters, the animation of them, the way they move, the other special effects, everything has always really worked. And Transformers 3 has taken that to another level. Everything is just mind-blowing, from the character design, the movement, the action sequences is great. Now, I just said action. The action in this film, there's more action in Transformers 3 than I think there are in Transformers 1 and 2 combined. And not only a quantity of action, but the quality of action. One of the big problems with the first two films, including the first one, which I loved, was that the action sequences were often really shaky, super quick edits and cuts, close-ups to pullbacks, and everything that, yeah, there was action going on, but you couldn't really figure what was happening, who was punching who, what robot is that? It was all very muddled. Terrible filmmaking in that regard. Transformers 3 actually goes much the other directions. A lot of slow motion, a lot of hanging on these amazing shots, a lot of wider views that are held steady instead of shaking the camera around. And the action is breathtaking. The last hour to 45 minutes of this movie is just nonstop go, 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 go. Intense action, some great sequences, some really badass stuff. Optimus Prime killing some Decepticons in really creative ways. And I ate that part up. One of the other things that's really good about this film is a huge improvement over not only the second one but the first one is Rosie Huntington-Whiteley, the girl who is taking over for Megan Fox. And she's not just replacing her in the role, it's a totally new character. And although Rosie is a Victoria's Secret model by trade and not an actress, she is a 10 times better actress than Megan Fox ever was, and almost as good looking. Shia LaBeouf, too, is somebody who I've always thought has been very strong in the movies. I mean, even in the horrible second one, I thought he was really good in it. He's got this great timing, and I think Sam Witwicky is a really great, funny, quick-witted character who says some really funny things at very, very good times. In this movie, we've seen that he's grown up. He's not the same kid that we saw in the first one. He is more mature. He's an adult now, but he still has those great characteristics. And again, I thought Shia was fantastic in the film. One of the other cool things is that one of the main characters in the film that we see in the trailer is Sentinel Prime. He's the big Autobot sitting in the throne-like chair, the captain's chair, on the crashed ship on the moon. And he's voiced by Leonard Nimoy, who's, of course, Spock from Star Trek, who also voiced Galvatron in the original animated cartoon. So that was really cool hearing his voice in there as well. It was also really neat seeing the amount of really cool actors in it. On top of the regular cast, and Shia's mom and dad return, who I've always loved in these films. We've got John Malkovich, who is awesome. We've got Ken Jeong, who I think is a comedic genius. Patrick Dempsey, and a few other people. And it was really neat seeing that whole cast put in there. However, although all these good things that I just said about the Transformers are true, this is still a bad movie. This is a bad movie with massive, massive plot holes, horrible, horrible dialogue in most cases, and it carried on one of the key mistakes of Transformers 2. See, Transformers 2, Michael Bay decided to take a turn in a direction of making caricature, zany, screwball, wacky characters that just appeal to 10-year-olds and 10-year-old senses of humor. Something that the first Transformers movie didn't have. And really, neither did the cartoon. I mean, if you take away Grimlock or Wheelie, that first season of the Transformers cartoon was actually kind of self-important. And that was never there. But that was a huge mistake in Transformers 2 with a leg-humping robot, a robot with giant testicles, the moronic and racist, frankly, twin characters. I mean, all these sorts of things that were just introduced, it just changed the vibe of Transformers entirely. And I hated it. And most people hated it. And when we come into Transformers 3, Michael Bay corrected a lot of mistakes. Better visual effects, more action, more Optimus Prime, less shaky camera so we can see the action. He corrected all these things. But he still carried over this ridiculous character, zany screwball mentality that we need to appeal to the kiddies and the little Jimmies. I hated that. You know what it reminded me of most of this movie? When I'm watching it, I'm seeing all these great iconic characters, John Turturro, John Malkovich, Ken Jeong. I mean, when I'm seeing all these great performers reduced and given characters that are just screwball caricatures that are just wacky and everything. It reminded me of the old Looney Tune cartoons. You know, when a Looney Tune cartoons would end and Bugs Bunny would hop up and say, "That's all, folks," and you'd hear that music, do 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 do. That's what you'd hear, right? But that's exactly what happened to me every single scene, or what felt like every single scene in the Transformers. It's like, oh look, there's the leg humping robot from Transformers 2 back. I bet he's gonna do something silly. Do 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 do. Hey, here comes the John Malkovich character. I bet something really cornball's gonna come out of his mouth. Do 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 do. Hey, it's John Turturro's Agent Simmons character. That guy's crazy. Do 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 do. It was stupid. It was ridiculous, and it ruined the entire film for me. Don't get me wrong, everything I said about the first part of this review is true. Great action, great visual effects, more of the Transformers, all this kind of stuff, and a better starting plot than maybe either of the first two Transformers films. This is a better movie than Transformers 2, but that ain't saying much, because Transformers 2 was a terrible pile of shit. This movie could have been great. You had a great starting premise. You had great visual effects. You invested more into action and made sure we could see it this time. But you still fell back to do 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 do. And I am beside myself with befuddlement of how any online film critic is talking positively about this film. I am the biggest Transformers fanboy in the world, and if Michael Bay announced tomorrow that he was going to do another one, guess what? I would buy the tickets, and I would be the first in line, still believing that Michael Bay can do it. But he didn't do it with Transformers 3. It's great visually, great action. And if you're going to go see it, and I do recommend you go see it, do yourself a favor. Show up an hour late, as long as you can still get seats, and then you'll save yourself a bunch of headache. Overall, I'm forced to give Transformers 3, Transformers Dark of the Moon, nothing better than a 4.5 out of 10. There are some things worth watching, but overall, it's just a bad film. Huge continuity errors, big, massive plot holes that they just pretend. Like, I'm sorry, at some point in the film, Sam Witwicky says, they don't have any means of leaving the planet. When like a half hour earlier, we saw the Autobots fly to the moon in a ship, and now they don't have a ship that can have them leave the planet? Anyway. That's my review for Transformers 3. Let me know your thoughts, and especially comment after you've seen the film, or comment now. It doesn't matter to me. I'm John Campea.